Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dear students, welcome back to our sessions for the subject Organization Behavior. Today's topic is about leadership style in organizations and to what extent this can affect the behavior of both the individual handling these issues and the employees under which this supervision requires such kind of leadership. So leadership in organization setting is actually one of the determinants that affect the behavior at an organization level, not individual. Now, as we talk about leadership, we will have the following points to consider as objective. We will define leadership and its perspectives, identify the 7 leadership competencies, discuss the path goal leadership model. We will evaluate the different leadership substitutes, and we will also differentiate between the transformational and the transactional leadership. Finally, we will talk about culture and to what extent can culture really affect the leadership style. Regarding the objectives we have cited, we will have the following contents: leadership and its perspective, the leadership competencies, the path goal leadership model, the leadership substitutes, both transformational and transactional leadership, and cultural issues in leadership. Now, as we start here, we said before that we have different determinants that really affect the behavior of individuals. One is about the individual's determinants, which we have already covered before. The other one is about the group, in which we discuss different issues such as teams and teamwork. And now we will talk about other determinants that can affect the overall behavior in the organization. One of these determinants is about leadership. So as you can see here, this is one of the most famous character as we talk about leadership, considering the perspectives, the way he adapts to lead. He is now quite recognized as a good leader. So the emerging view is that effective leaders subordinate their own egos and nurture leadership in others. For example here, Sir Richard Branson is often cited as a role model for new leadership. He said, "I've got people all over the world and it's up to me to let them test and improve themselves." So that's why we have different characteristics and competencies affiliating with leadership styles adopted by the leader himself. So what is leadership? Leadership is defined as the ability to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute toward the effectiveness of the organizations of which they are members. In other words, it's the way you can achieve things through the people. However, this process of achieving the organization objectives through the leadership side rather than management can also be different from one to another. That is why we will take different competencies affiliating with leadership. One of these issues is the perspectives of leadership. What we mean by perspective is that the kind of leadership style can be affected by these different perspectives, but for the very least number of perspectives that should exist in leadership styles, so we can say that this leader is really affecting the behavior of the subordinates in the organization. So we have the competency perspective. So we can't say a leader is a good leader unless he's competent in dealing with job duties. So ways affiliating with strategizing, analyzing, communicating, and delegating as well are all ways that can be referred to as competency perspective that should be there in the leader. Behavior perspective, which is more about how people act, how they behave, understanding the others. Contingency perspective. Good leaders here, as one perspective of leadership, is that we have to have plan Bs. So in case the leadership style that is being adopted by a leader is going right, but for certain circumstances, we might need to change, adapt, or amend the way things have been used. So that is why contingency perspective is one of the things that should exist in leadership. And we also have this new perspective action leadership, which is referred to as transformational perspective. It's a total change that should exist in a company, and that is referred to as transformational leadership. And finally, implicit leadership perspective. This is more about the person and the characteristics that the leadership has and to what extent he or she can really affect the subordinates through the implicit leadership perspective. So, what are the competencies that we talk about should exist as we refer to leadership perspective? Here we have 7 leadership competencies. The first one is about the emotional intelligence. Now, talking about a leader who is achieving the goals of the company through the others requires him or her to be able to figure out the emotions, kind of needs and wants of the employees he's actually supervising or directing. So that is why this is one of the main competencies that should exist in leaders. So perceiving, assimilating, understanding, and regulating emotions of the others is a very important issue. Without having such kind of capability, maybe the leader will really clash as it comes to decision-making process or affecting behaviors of the others or changing in the process of the work in the organization. Integrity is another issue, which is honesty here. Truthfulness translates words into deeds, not just saying things, but also being involved in the conduction, executing of things that have been claimed to be of potential benefit to the company. We have derived the inner motivation to pursue goals. This is one of the main competencies of leaders. Need for achievement is one of the motivation that can be cited in different contexts, but as we talk about leadership, this is a very prominent competency that should exist actually in leadership, and that is why we can easily distinguish between leaders and managers, leaders and non-leader characters. So quest to learn, figuring out what is needed to achieve something is also one of the competencies of good leaders. And then we have the motivation of leadership. For example, high need for socialized power to accomplish teams or firms' goals. Remember, we said there is a difference between management and leadership. So management is achieving the objective of the company through the process of the management functions, while here you try to achieve the company's objectives through the people. So the power that we have or can enable us to do that is actually the power we gain from the team member, from the individuals within the boundary of the company itself, which can be power affiliating with respect, with information, or the socialized power that we have. But it can be the power that comes from legitimate position. And that is more about management, not leadership. Another competency here is called the self-confidence. High self-efficacy regarding ability to lead the others, the inner belief that he or she is capable to handle the issues affiliating with leading the employees. Intelligence is another competency. There must be an average or at the very least a certain level of intelligence that leaders should have so they can really analyze the data before they can influence or try to influence the other. So above average cognitive ability affiliating with the intellectuality of the leader so that they can easily analyze problems and opportunities and come up with what they think is a good decision. Then we have knowledge of the business here. That is another competency. We cannot assume a manager or a leader who is not capable enough to lead the business according to the data he or she has. So familiar with the business environment, internal and external one, aids initiative, decision making. These are important requirements that leaders should actually have. In this regards to the points that we discussed before, so leadership won't actually be effective without the information that can really help a company or organizations. Now in search of leader integrity here, there are a lot of studies that come up with findings according to the population being part of the study. So they come up with integrity as the priority they think is the most important competency leaders should have. So studies say integrity is the most important leadership characteristics in the eyes of the followers. So also called authentic leadership. Here, individual acts with sincerity, has a higher moral capacity to judge dilemmas that they face. However, here, most people think business leaders lack integrity. According to these researchers, 73% say CEOs of large firms cannot be trusted. That's in the United States of America. While nearly 40% do not trust their immediate boss. Approximately 50% say business wrongdoing has undermined their trust in employees or in employers. This is in Australia. So that is why, according to the research findings of such kind of field of study, we find that integrity is a priority when it comes to followers. And those followers are actually the source of power that leaders can use to affect and enhance the change they want to get. Now, competency perspective limitations, as you talk about limitations, we can't assume that all the perspectives and competencies exist. Leadership can really work. We have different factors that can affect the leadership effectiveness. So we refer to these things as limitation. So here, for example, leadership potential, not performance. So we still need to develop leader skills here. So the leader skill from those competencies can also be enhanced. This implies a universal approach, but some competencies may not be valuable in all situations. And that's why we have a lot of studies, a lot of schools, as we discuss things about leadership, things that affiliate with the characteristics of the leader himself, or some studies may refer to the ways things are handled, not the characteristics only of the leaders. Things are related to the situation itself, and accordingly, the type and the style of leadership should be adapted, and so on. So some traits are subjective, more related to the person himself, and may have some kind of impact on the way they work. So support implicit leadership theory. Now we talk about leader behavioral perspective. So what we mean by behavioral perspective is that we focus more on the behavior of the people themselves. So we go people-oriented behaviors. Here, showing mutual trust and respect, concern for employee needs, desire to look out for employee welfare, the good life employees should have. Now, if these considerations are priority of the leadership, then we say there is behavior perspective being adopted by leadership. So the tendency of leading people is more about people than it is to task. And that is why leaders may gain more power and can socialize easier by doing such kind of performance. Another kind of perspective is more about task. So it is referred to as task-oriented behaviors. For example, leaders here assign specific tasks, they ensure employees follow rules, and they set stretch goals to achieve performance capacity. Now, stretch goals here are actually very important. You don't want to specify goals that are not achievable, or you define a time that is not possible to handle the goals, the content of the goals within. So that's why, as talking about tasks, it should be something quite specific, measurable, realistic, agreeable, and timely measured, but the kind of time and the period of time needed to achieve all the tasks in a proper way. Now, the path goal leadership style, which is very important here, we have first the directive, and then as we drop down, we will see that the leadership style that is adopted by the leader is different. As we talk about tasks, we talk about people, and then we move to needs and wants, etc. So the first one is about task-oriented behavior. Here the leader focuses on task itself. So that's why we refer to it as directive. leaders' role here is to direct people on what to do, what should not be done, and what should be done. Supportive here is more about the people. Leaders' concern is about people, needs, wants, understanding people, the emotional intelligence, etc. So people-oriented behavior. We have participative here. That is another kind of practice leadership might exhibit here, in which they encourage employees' involvement in decision-making process. That is something that you can't find in every single leadership style using companies, but it is one of the leadership styles that can be found in different organizations. And the last one is about achievement-oriented here. So using goal setting and positive self-fulfilling prophecy. So as you notice, as we drop down here, the more we go down, the more we rely on the people to achieve the jobs. The less we focus on tasks, and we support and focus on people. To the extent that we let go enough zone of decision to the employees rather than to the leader himself. Now the Pavlo leadership model is as follows. We said the leader behavior can be either directive, considering the task, supportive, considering the people, participative in terms of decision-taking process, and achievement-oriented, that is giving enough space of freedom for employees to handle the tasks. This will result in leader effectiveness for sure. So employee motivation will be motivated, they will be satisfied, and leader will gain power through the acceptance of the leader from the employees. However, we may have some contingencies here. These contingencies can affect the relation between leader behaviors and leader effectiveness. Example, the environmental contingencies is one of the examples that really affect such kind of relation. Employee contingencies, on the way the employee consider the behavior of the leader might be different from one individual to another. Besides the time of the leadership, for example, the circumstances that the company is actually encountering right now is another issue. Decision-making process under stress in different occasions, for example, a lot of employees being under one department, so a lot of issues can affect this clear relation between leader behavior. A lot of factors, as you can see, can affect the relation between leader behaviors and the effectiveness of leader. Now, contingency leader theories. We have different theories regarding the contingency leader as follows. The situational leadership model by Hersey. For example here, effective leaders vary style with followers or readiness. So leader style here, telling, selling, participating, and delegating. Okay, so you first direct people to do things. Here, selling things, you try to let people more involved in decision making. You support them regarding their needs and wants emotionally so that they can participate. And finally, you can simply delegate them to do the job. While on the other hand, we have another contingency model theory. Leadership style is stable and based on personality. Now, that's why leaders actually are different, adopting different approaches. This style depends on the situational control. So leader, member relations, task, structure, position, power, all these elements can somehow tell what the best type of leadership should be. So that is why we refer to as situational kind of leadership. Now here we have the substitutes of leaders. For example, leader substitutes are New Balance. For example here, you can notice that New Balance athletics shoe use leadership substitute more than direct supervision in order to guide employee behavior. For example, what leadership substitute would New Balance rely on? So we said that substituting the leadership side means that you either train the employees to do the job in the best way, so you will not rely more on directive kind of leadership. Now, delegating is another way of substitute here. So we have some kind of practices that the company can adopt in order to either minimize the need to the leadership style adopted, or to even replace or substitute the leadership needed. Examples of such kind of substitutes here: the contingencies that limit a leader's influence or make a particular leadership style unnecessary, not important. So, for example here, training, as you said, and experience will replace the task-oriented leadership. Employees now are well trained to do things, have enough experience to handle the tasks and the duties. There will be no need to adopt task-oriented leadership. Cohesive team replaces supportive leadership. Team members are more cohesive to each other, more satisfied, they can socialize easily, and that actually can support the work and accordingly will replace the supportive leadership. Self-leadership replaces achievement-oriented leadership style. It is now something inner, and the employees are motivated or self-induced to handle their own goals, and that will of course replace the achievement-oriented leadership. Now we go to the transformational versus transactional leaders. Transformational leader is actually a new kind of term, or we can consider it as a new leadership style, but has been developed during different set of time before. This kind of leadership is based on leading people to adopt a change in the organization. So that's why we refer to it as transformational leaders. They transform the organization to a better place. According to many factors, of course, we may talk about the environment surrounding the business itself. So in order to fit with the environment, the new changes in the market, whatsoever kind of factor, external or internal, that might affect the success of the company, so leaders might adopt such kind of change. Leaders will be the change agents here. So they will be the individuals who are supposed to handle any kind of obstacles obscuring the success of the change. Another kind of leader is called transactional leaders. Here in terms of managing, they link job performance to rewards. This is more about everyday kind of operations to handle all the goals in a way to achieve the corporate objectives, of course. They ensure employees have necessary resources, and they of course apply contingency leadership, just in case plan A doesn't work, so they have other alternatives to handle the tasks. Now the elements of the transformational leadership here, of course, as we talk about transformational leadership, we always talk about a change. And talking about a change, we have to have a vision. And in order for a change to pass, we must communicate that change to the other through the vision. So the vision must be communicated to the employees. It's a human nature that a lot of people resist the change, so things should be clarified enough from the very beginning. And then we have to model the vision through the leader himself, and creating a strategic vision. According to the vision, we come up with our long-run plan on how to achieve the vision, and then we build commitment among the others through the power that the leader has among his followers. How to evaluate the transformational leadership? First of all, we know that transformational leadership is of course important. As we talk about a change, this change might imply that without which the company might collapse. So here, high employee satisfaction, performance, the organization's citizenship and creativity. So by having such kind of standards, we can evaluate the success of such leadership style. So the better the performance is according to the change desired, satisfaction of the employees, exhibiting the citizenship by the employees, and of course creativity are all means we can use to evaluate to what extent such kind of leadership is really effective. Transformational leaders identify by their success. So it's kind of demonstrable kind of behavior that you can only notice by the final output of the leaders. However, there are some kind of limitations here. For example, referring to the universal theory, they need a contingency-oriented theory. A change does not always take place, or sometimes problems can happen within the line of achieving the strategy. We need also to recognize differences across cultures. A change that has got something to do with other people's sensitive or most sensitive attitudes or elements of the life can really cause problems. So referring to cultures and a clash because of the change with cultures of the other can really hinder the success of this style of leadership. Now the implicit leadership perspective. We have the attributing leadership, stereotyping leadership, and the need for situational control. Now sometimes we have, or we may refer to the type or the style of leadership that we think can fit a given situation, or we may prefer this leadership style because we believe it is the right kind of leadership style to go on with the business we have. However, things sometimes change as for the environment, the internal structure, the number of employees the company may have, issues that can happen, personalities of the leaders, and that is why we have these issues. We attribute leadership to different perspectives, either whether internally or externally. Stereotyping leadership, we can copy the leadership style used by successful companies and adopt it as a style in our company, and vice versa, of course. And need for situational control, sometimes we have to change the style of leadership according to what is currently happening. So it is more based on the situation than it is based on the characteristics or the personality of the leader. The last point here is about culture. The Ubuntu leadership here is a word that is used in Africa, which means that profound African sense that each of us is human through the humanity of other human beings. So, explained by former South African President Nelson Mandela. So here he wants to address the issue of the value system that provides a framework for leading others in Africa that is based more on humanity, understanding the others, based more on behavior. So accordingly, this is the kind of source of power leaders might really have to affect the others. Now, when we talk about cultural issues in leadership, we have the following here. The values, cultural values perspective. So these cultural values actually affect and shape leaders' values and norms. In this regards to the capabilities and the competencies of the leader, whatsoever the outcome of such kind of style should never clash with the norms and values of the others. And that is why culture has a direct impact on our or on leaders' perspectives, leaders' way of dealing with things. Culture can also influence decisions and actions. What can go right in such country, for example, like Africa, may not necessarily fit other countries. So that's why we refer to situations sometimes and the impact of culture as both factors can affect the leadership style. Some leadership styles are universal, of course. Others differ across cultures. So charismatic visionary seems to be universal. This is something that you like to have in leaders in disregard of the culture they operate or they work in. The last issue is about gender. Can gender affect leadership style effectiveness? So here, according to research, they found that male and female leaders have similar task and people-oriented leadership. However, participative leadership style is used more often by female leaders. participative leadership works better in some cultures than the others, where you can encourage people to take part of the decision. While here this is more in collective, as we talk about collectivism and individualism in different countries, such kind of cultures can affect how leaders see or believe that decisions should be taken. Now, we may evaluate the effectiveness of female leaders according to the gender as follows. In regards to the previous studies here, women rated less favorably than equivalent male leaders due to stereotyping, which is one issue as we talk about female leaders. Recent evidence according to that issue, women here rated more favorably than men, particularly on emerging leadership style, like for example coaching and teamwork. This has got something to do with the nature of women that maybe men may not necessarily have. So dear students, by this we come to the end of our session regarding the leadership style used by companies. We, throughout the session, discussed the leadership. We defined the meaning of leadership and its perspective. We identified the 7 leadership competencies. We discussed the path goal leadership model. And we evaluated the different leadership substitutes. We differentiated between the transformational and the transactional leadership. And we discussed several culture issues in leadership. As we always have here, you will have an attachment affiliating with what you have to do according to the topic we discussed. Assignment number 11 is attached with this session. So we come to the end point of our session for today. Thank you very much for listening. Until we meet next session, I wish you all the best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.